Hi guys, welcome back to Tila Fashion. Today's video is quite different. On today's video we're going to be recreating the look in the middle and the look on the sides are the final product. So if you want to see how we got here, make sure to watch this video till the end. I have the materials that we're going to be using with me here. I have my fabric, which is satin. I'm using satin fabric, 2 yards of satin fabric. I'm not sure what color this is, but I think it's oxblood or burgundy. If you know the exact color, please leave it in the comment section. And my pattern paper, scissors, all of that. So I'll just go ahead and start with the pattern now. I'm going to start with the neckline and the shoulder. For the neck, I'm taking 5 inches for width because I want it to be a bit wide. And for the shoulder, I'm just going to take the shoulder measurement and divide it by 2 and also add half an inch seam allowance. Next, I'm going to go ahead to draw out the armhole length and I'm going with 8 inches. Next, I'm going to go ahead to take the bust circumference measurement and divide it by 4 and I'll take a seam allowance of 1.5. So whatever I get after dividing by 4, I'll just add 1.5 to that for seam allowance. Now I'm going to go ahead to measure the length from the shoulder to the under bust plus my seam allowance, shoulder to waist plus seam allowance. But I'm also going to add extra 3 inches to that at the end and I'm going to explain. So because of the style of the dress, I'm going to impute a picture here so I can explain better. It is ruched before the line connecting the upper half to the lower half. So we want the upper half to be a bit longer so we can ruche it. That's why I'll be adding extra 3 inches below the waistline. Next, I'm going to take my waist circumference measurement and divide it by 4 and also add a seam allowance of 1.5 inch. And I'm going to extend the same measurement to the 3 inches that we took. Piece, we can go ahead to cut out the back piece. So for the back piece, first thing I'm going to be measuring out is the zip allowance and I'm taking 1 inch for the zip allowance. So because the front piece didn't have that and the back piece would have that, I'm going to go ahead to extend the waistline measurements by 1 inch so I can later on draw out the dart. So I'll just extend it by 1 inch and then connect it to the bust line. So this 1 inch is basically just going to create space for the dart. So after using the front piece to trace out the back piece, adding my zip allowance and adding allowance for my dart, I can now go ahead to actually mark out my dart and I'm taking it 5 inches away from the center back line and then I'm going to extend it to the under bust and it's going to be 1 inch wide. Then I can go ahead to just create the neckline for the back piece. The neckline for the back would be 1 inch low and 5 inches wide. I'm just going to draw that out. So these are the two pieces, the front and the back piece, and you can see the only difference with them is the neckline, the zip allowance and the side that we extended for the back piece for the dart. So now we can go ahead to focus on the front piece and go ahead to slash and spread it. So I'm going to slash and spread from the armhole where the armhole stops upwards. And the lines that I have drawn out are about 3 inches apart and I'm just going to cut them so I can place it on fabric. For the placement of the fabric, I'm first going to fold it in two because the pattern is made on fold. I'm just going to make sure that my fabric is folded in two, and then I'm also going to fold the top with about 2.5 inches, and the 2.5 inches is going to serve as the facing for the front piece. So now I can go ahead to arrange my pattern on the fabric, and I'm going to align the center front of the bottom part of the pattern with the center front of the fabric. Make sure that is straight, and then I'm also going to align the shoulder with the edge of the fabric, so the beginning of the shoulder and the end of the neckline should be touching the edge of the fabric, just like that. Now I can go ahead to cut this out. So this is what we have now, and you can see that when you straighten the armhole, you would get the cowl neck design, and you're going to see the beauty of this when we're done sewing. Now I can go ahead with the lower half of the dress, and I'm taking the length from the half length to the knee, but then I'm going to add 10 inches to that just to make it a bit longer, so that when it's ruched it can go back to the normal length it's supposed to be. So you take the normal length it's supposed to be and add 10 inches to it, and the 10 inches would also include the seam allowance. Next, I'm going to go ahead to mark out the hip point. Normally it would be 8 inches for this client, but since we're going to be ruching it and the measurement is going to go up when it's ruched, I'm going to bring it down a bit, and I'm going to add 3 inches to 8 inches, making a total of 11 inches. So the new hip point will be at 11 inches. So to get the waist circumference measurement of the lower half, I'm just going to take my front piece, the upper half of my front piece, and just measure the waist and then put that down for the lower half. Then I'm going to take my hip circumference measurement, divide it by 4, and then add 1.5 seam allowance to it. I'll just trace that down so I can subtract 2 inches at the bottom there to just give a pencil skirt kind of shape. Now I can go ahead to cut out the back piece for the lower half, and the only difference is going to be the 1 inch we're going to add at the side for the dart, and we're also going to add 1 inch for the zip allowance. Onto the sleeve now, first I'll just mark 1 inch at the bottom for seam allowance, and then my length, I'll measure out my length from that and add half an inch seam allowance for the top. So there'll be half an inch seam allowance at the top and 1 inch seam allowance at the bottom. Then I'll go ahead to measure the armhole from the dress, and then I'm just going to put it in this curved shape, and then I'll go ahead to measure my sleeve width and divide it by 2, and also add a seam allowance of 1.5 and just connect that to the armhole. So these are the pieces that we have now. Now we can go ahead to join in all of this together to form the beautiful dress. So with sewing, I am going to start with the upper front piece, and I'm going to go ahead to fold in the facing and just sew the shoulder together. So now I can go ahead with the neckline of the back piece, and I'll just use the facing to turn it over, and I'll also sew the edge of the facing. So after sewing the neckline of the back piece, I'm going to go ahead to mark out the darts and sew the darts for the back piece, both the upper and the lower pieces. So I went ahead to join the upper and lower pieces together, and this is how it looks now. It's looking redly long, but you shouldn't worry because we're going to ruche it and it will return back to normal size or normal length it's supposed to be. After joining the shoulder together, I'm just going to go ahead to mark out the round measurements divided by 2 and mark it down on the fabric so we can join the front and the back pieces together. And before joining the sides together, I'm going to go ahead to sew the bottom seam. So now that I've joined the sides together, I want to create the channel for the strap. so we'll be able to ruche the gown. So I'm going to start 3.5 inches above the half length, and I'm going to sew the line to be 1 cm wide till from the 3.5 inches above the half length till the end. So I have gone ahead to create the channel. Now we need to make the straps that will pass through the channel. I've cut out my material and it is 1 inch wide, and its length should be longer than the channel that we've already created, so it doesn't end up getting lost in the channel. So after sewing the straps, I'll just go ahead to pass it through the channel, and then when I get to the end of the channel, I'm just going to stick it out a bit and just seal the channel by just sewing on it. After fixing the straps, when we go ahead to ruche the gown, this is what we have, and you can see how it's ruching very nicely. Now we can go ahead to fix the sleeve and do other finishings for the gown. Alright guys, so we've come to the end of this video. Thank you so much for sticking till the end. I hope it was helpful. I hope you liked it. If you did, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the like button so this video can get recommended to others. Don't forget to also turn on your post notifications so you get notified each time I post. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions. I'm open to replying them. Thank you, and I'll see you in my next video.